Hello and welcome. I'm Keira Sorrells. I'm the founder and executive director of the NICU Parent Network, the premier professional organization for NICU parent leaders who collectively support the needs and best interests of NICU families. Together, we envision a world where every NICU parent is an essential and integral member of their baby's care team. As many of you know, this month is Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Month. And loss is certainly something that many of our members and the families they support are no stranger to. In fact, we have, I believe right now, we have 42 NICU support organization members, and over two-thirds of those organizations were started by a family who has experienced loss. Um, we're kicking off this conversation series. It's a new conversation series for us. If you've been following us for any length of time over the last few months, we've done some highlights for our member organizations. We also have a series on the first Friday of every month called Let's Talk About Race. And so this month, to honor all of the families who grieve the loss of a child, we are going to be talking to some of our members. So this is our Conversations on Loss series. And, you know, although much progress has been made in openly discussing pregnancy and infant loss, there really is still a long way to go to normalize this topic and to open up avenues for understanding and support, because there are still so many families that grieve in silence and in solitude. So, what this conversation series is going to be, it's going to feature some of our own NICU Parent Network members, and they'll be sharing their unique loss experiences. Together, we will explore miscarriage, loss in multiple birth, loss in the NICU, and loss after the NICU. And our hope with this is that we not only draw awareness to the different types of perinatal, neonatal, and infant loss, but most importantly, that by sharing these experiences, we inspire hope in families who are grieving, and also make sure that we share the many, many, many resources and supports that are available to grieving families. So today, we're actually going to focus on a type of loss that can be very divisive. It's often misunderstood as well, and that is multifetal reduction. If you've heard me speak before, or if you have even just read my bio on our website, you have likely heard about my triplets. There were 25 weekers. They spent many months in the NICU. Zoe was there for 9.5 months and then was rehospitalized at 14 months old and passed away very suddenly. But the truth is, I actually have three living children. So I have my surviving triplets. I have my surprise baby who is 3 years old, and I have four children who are in heaven. So there was Zoe. There was a miscarriage that I actually thought that I had ovarian or uterine cancer, and went in for um, to have a biopsy. And during the pre-op, they realized that I was pregnant. But when we did an ultrasound, there was no heartbeat. And so that was a really kind of different experience, because I grieved something, but I thought, oh, how can I grieve something that I didn't even know I had till it was gone? But that's a topic for another day. Um, and then there's multifetal reduction, and that is where my other loss comes into play. Um, So according to the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology, multifetal pregnancy reduction is defined as a first trimester or early second trimester procedure for reducing the total number of fetuses in a multifetal pregnancy by one or more. In most cases, the involved gestations will be higher order multifetal pregnancies, which is defined by the presence of three or more fetuses. So while I talk about being pregnant and having triplets, the truth is, after fertility treatments, we did oral medications as well as injectable medications coupled with intrauterine insemination. Um, I actually was pregnant with quintuplets. And I will never forget, this was months and months and months of numerous. I mean, I can't even count how many times I went into that doctor's office, how many ultrasounds I had, checking the follicles and the sizes and all of that, how many times my blood was drawn. But on this particular one, I did actually have a positive at-home pregnancy test. And I remember being in the little changing room before I would go into the ultrasound room. And I just said, God, please let there be a heartbeat. Just let there be a heartbeat. And so I was laying there on the table, and she was, doing that lovely wand type ultrasound. My husband was at my head, and I will say, my husband, he works in radiology. He's not a radiologist, but he's certainly knows the look on a technologist's face when they see something that is abnormal or something that's not supposed to be there, something that is not the typical. And so he just, he didn't say anything to me, but he knew that something was going on. And then she proceeded to turn the screen to us and say, I haven't seen this in over 10 years, but there are 5 heartbeats. And she pointed out each little flicker on the screen. And then she said, to stay there, get dressed, and the nurse would take me to see the doctor. My physician was not in the office that day. So we saw a physician that we had never met before. And I remember we sat there in front of his desk waiting, and he kind of burst into the room. Before he even sat down in his chair, he said, "This was a mistake. This shouldn't have happened. You have to reduce to twins, or better yet, a singleton. But we don't do that here. You have to go somewhere else." He almost said it like it was, like it was, it was dirty. Um, and I'll never forget that. This was a moment that for 2.5 years we had been trying for. And any joy that we were going to feel in that moment was completely squashed. And we left there with 5 ultrasound pictures of a little fuzzy, a little fuzzy thing, because it was, this is, I think, at 5 or maybe 6 weeks, so you can't see anything except the sac. So we left there with that, and we left with a sheet of paper with a very poor photocopy of the medical definition of multifetal reduction. And we were just stunned. We were not referred to anybody. We were not counseled in that moment. Sorry, this is actually the first time I've ever shared this. So the next week I went back and I met with my physician who was back in the office. And I said, well, I guess I need to go ahead and see my OB, who was actually a very good and close family friend. And he said, oh, no. You don't go see them yet. Not yet. We need to take care of this first. So again, it was almost like I felt like they needed to clean up their mess um, before they could pass me on to have my pregnancy. Um, that was the last time I went to my reproductive endocrinologist, even though they wanted to see me, a couple more times during the first trimester. And nobody ever called me to see how we were doing, to check on us, to wonder why we didn't keep our next appointment that we had scheduled. But I did see my OB, and she and everyone in her office were wonderful. Um, she referred me to a maternal fetal medicine specialist, and both she and that MFM just sat us down. Um, they acknowledged what a difficult situation we were in. Um, as later on, I remember speaking to a therapist about it, and she said, something like this is when you have a choice between two options where neither one is good, and there's no guaranteed positive outcome. As medical professionals, they can't give, or they're not supposed to, in this case, I suppose, give kind of directive guidance. They're not supposed to say, this is what you should do. What they're supposed to do is give you all of the risks and the possible outcomes and, what can happen, what might happen. And that's what they did. And they said, if you choose to carry all five babies, you and your babies have a 50% chance of a positive outcome. And a positive outcome meant that we all lived. Not that the babies would be born full term, because that's just, I don't know if that's ever happened in history. Probably not. They said that, this was, 16 years ago. They said at that time, um, quintuplets were typically born around 27, 28 weeks, that quadruplets were, 28 to 30 weeks, triplets were 32 to 34 weeks. And then twins, could be born all the way up to full term. But we had to make the decision very quickly because time was running out. And it was very surreal to be thinking about this after, like I said, 2.5 years and of fertility treatments and trying to get pregnant and wanting so desperately to have my own children. This was our last round of fertility treatments. We had decided that we were not going to continue to pursue them because it took a huge toll on me physically and emotionally, a strain on our marriage. And so this was it. This was my last chance to have my own children. So they said that with triplets, there was an 85% chance of a good outcome. With quadruplets, it was a 75% chance. With twins, it was, at that point, like 98% chance of a good outcome. And again, a good outcome meant that we all survived the pregnancy. But that was all they could get close to guaranteeing, which you really can't guarantee anything in medicine. So we did make the decision. We did see my therapist at the time, and I just remember looking at my husband and just saying, what if I can't carry all five? What if they all die? What if we have no babies after all of this? But then what if I make this choice to reduce the pregnancy, and then you resent me for that choice? Of course, he reassured me that, we were in this together, and we did ultimately decide to reduce to triplets. And as soon as I made that decision, It's almost like I put the two other babies in a box in the back of my brain, and I threw away the key. And from that moment on, before I'd even had the procedure, I identified myself as a triplet mom, high risk pregnancy, triplet mom. And I remember going in for the procedure, and there was a nurse who was at my feet, and she kept rubbing my feet. I'll never forget that. She kept rubbing my feet, and I think she was trying to provide some sense of comfort, but I had so disassociated myself with what was going on. I just wanted her to get off of my feet. I wanted her to leave me alone. So we did the procedure, and I went on in my pregnancy. Of course, my 3 babies were delivered at 25 weeks, 5 days. Certainly not the 32 to 34 week gestational age that we were hoping for. And I do remember the MFM coming to visit me after I had delivered. And he just simply said, "Come talk to me if you ever decide to do this again." As if it was something I had done. And that's when I thought, this is my fault. My babies are born at 25 weeks, and they're suffering in the NICU because of what I did. But again, that was the last time I thought about the other 2 for a long time. And it wasn't until Zoe died and my grief became so intense that I was diagnosed with major clinical depression, generalized anxiety disorder, and post-traumatic stress disorder. And it wasn't until I started grief counseling for what I thought I was grieving with Zoe, but it was also the grief and the shame that I felt about the multifetal reduction. I couldn't talk to anybody about it. It was like, from the beginning, it was like this dirty little secret, and I feared being judged. I feared being told out loud what I already felt about myself. And but this counselor she was at our church. She's a grief counselor who had actually been, believe it or not, a NICU nurse, and then had gone to seminary, and she often worked with the babies that were going to either be terminal or the babies that were definitely going to be in the NICU for a really long time. But she helped me to really see these babies as my children, to acknowledge what had happened, and to forgive myself, which is what I had to do inside my own heart. Over time, the shame that I felt dissipated. And I will say that I I amassed quite a team to help me through these mental health issues. I had a Christian grief counselor. I had a psychiatrist who managed my medications. I had, an online support group for mothers who had experienced a loss with multiples. Um, there was a lot that I was actively doing to try to get better and to be in a better place mentally. But it took a long time. I mean, it was probably 5 or 6 years after Zoe's death when I finally felt like I didn't feel shame anymore. Um, I just knew that this was part of my story. It was part of my experience, and that it would be used in some way, some possible way to help other families. I didn't know how or when. Um, and just as I was at that point, um, we um, we talked to our survivors, Avery and Lily, and they knew that there were quintuplets, but two had died in mommy's tummy, and then they knew that Zoe had passed, of course, when she was a year old. And they asked, they were in elementary school, and they said, well, was it a boy or a girl? And we said, well, we don't know. It was too early to know. And they decided that one was a boy and they were going to name him Aiden, and the other one was a girl and they were going to name her Gracie. So we had Aiden and Gracie. And I once posted a picture when we did a balloon release um, during Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Month. And Avery and Lily at the time drew pictures on the balloons, and they drew a picture to Zoe, and they drew Aiden, and they drew Gracie. And I posted that. And I got a private message um, from someone who had supported me through the loss of Zoe. And she said, how dare you? You don't deserve to claim those two babies. And she said out loud everything that I had been working so hard to overcome, that I had been beating myself up with for years about. But again, thankfully, because of my team of support that I had really kind of built around me, I worked through that, and I realized that was her opinion. She is absolutely, free to have her opinions and her views. But I just want to say, through all of this, because this is 16 years later, and like I said, it's taken me this long to speak about it in any semi public format. So if you are someone who is in a position to provide peer support for someone who either is making this decision or has made this decision, to do whatever you can to withhold judgment. Believe that these parents are making a decision based on so many very complex factors, and it is anything but an easy decision. Recognize that there is trauma involved, and they may not be ready to face that. Just like I understand that when I disassociated from those two babies, I know now, because of being in this maternal infant health arena for so long, I know that was my brain's protective response to trauma. So recognize that there is trauma involved, and give them the support that's needed. Help them to claim those babies or that baby. Help them to embrace all of their children, living and not living. And know that it doesn't matter how a baby is lost, when that baby is lost, that every loss is difficult. There is no one there's no way to measure grief. There's no way to measure a parent's love for their children. And so I just want to thank you for giving me the chance to share my story with you. And I hope that you will continue to watch throughout the month, because we do have some other conversations coming up later in the month. We'll be doing one each week. We'll have one that focuses on miscarriage, one on loss in the NICU, and then one that focuses on loss in multiple birth and post NICU loss. So thank you so much for taking the time to listen to me. And I hope and wish all of you a beautiful and wonderful rest of your week. Thank you.